Good morning, everyone. I hope you are fine. In our lecture today, we will discuss chapters 25 to 27 in Wuthering Heights, a novel by Emily Bronte. Okay, starting with chapter 25, we will discuss the summary and the commentary of this chapter. So, the main characters in this chapter are Lockwood, Nolly, Edgar, Linton, Kathy, and Heathcliff. Setting, places, Wuthering Heights, and Thrushcross Grange. Time before 1801. Okay, in accordance to the summary of chapter 25, we have a break here from narration. So, breaking from her narrative, Nellie tells Lockwood that these events transpired a little over a year ago. Lockwood is so enraptured with the story that he begs her to continue. On her part, Kathy obeys her father's wishes. The narration here is continued. Nellie tells Edgar that Linton is of trail health, and Edgar admits that he fears for Kathy's happiness. He even concedes that if marrying Linton would make Kathy happy, he would be in favor of it, even though it means Heathcliff would get what he wants. Although Linton never visits the Grange, after much bleeding, Edgar allows Kathy to visit with Linton on the moors. Now, in the commentary of chapter 25, we have two important points. The first point is about time frame, Lockwood's arrival, and the justification for the characters' behaviors. So, this short chapter is important for two significant reasons. First, it establishes the time frame, the previous winter, which is relatively close to Lockwood's arrival. Because the current event just occurred the previous winter, the characters who Lockwood encounters at Wuthering Heights may still be closely affected by the events that have transpired. Recall that at Lockwood's visit to Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff had just recently lost his son, and Kathy, her husband, and the way they reacted to the loss was indicative about their natures. On the other side, the second important point and reason here is about Edgar. This chapter establishes Edgar's mind shortly before his death. It presents Edgar as a pathetic character. So Edgar now and up to the time of his death remains misguided. He only wants Kathy's happiness, but happiness is something he was unable to provide for her mother, and it is something that he is unable to provide for their daughter too. So actually, there's nothing remarkable in this chapter. The only development in the plot is that after a good deal of hesitation, Edgar allows his daughter to meet young Linton, not at the High but on the moors in the vicinity of the Grange. This is a kind of compromise at which Edgar arrives under the pressure of Kathy's desire. Edgar now is passing through a critical phase in his life. He is laying and incapable of any physical and mental exertion. In fact, he becomes a pathetic character in our eyes. Now, he is a very good and a well meaning man, naturally devoted to his daughter. But there is nothing heroic about him. His relentless attitude towards Heathcliff is, however, perfectly justified and raises him in our estimation. Moving on to the second chapter that will be discussed in this lecture, chapter 26, its summary and commentary. The main characters in chapter 26 are Lockwood, Nolly, Edgar, Linton, Kathy, and Heathcliff. Setting places, Wuthering Heights, Thrushcross Grange, and the Moors. Time before 1801. Well, in the summary and commentary of chapter 26, we have three important points. The first point is about young Linton and the first meeting with Kathy. So, at the time of the first scheduled meeting on the moors, Linton is not at the agreed upon spot. Rather, he is quite close to Wuthering Heights. Both Nellie and Kathy are concerned about Linton's health, but he insists that he is getting stronger. During their entire visit, he is squeamish and scared and is constantly looking back towards his house. When it is time to leave, Kathy assures Linton that she promises to meet him again next Tuesday. On the way home, Kathy and Nellie discuss Linton's health and decide to wait until the next visit to determine the extent of his deterioration. Actually, here Linton, at their very first meeting after Edgar's permission had been given, Kathy found young Linton to be even more sickly and pale than ever before. Kathy looked at him with grief and astonishment. In fact, she found that he was hardly capable of much conversation with her. He looked absolutely listless and apathetic. It even appeared from his manner that, instead of feeling pleased to meet Kathy, he enjoyed her company as a kind of punishment. However, when in view of his indifferent attitude, she got ready to leave him. He began to feel agitated and looking fearfully towards the highest, requested her to spend another half an hour with him at least. He tried to explain his state of ill health by saying that it was the heavy weather and the heat that were making him dull. He also wanted her to convey to his uncle, Edgar, that he was in fairly good health. He then urged her not to fail to meet him again on the following Thursday. That is a week later. The second important point here is Kathy's reaction to Linton's behavior and her mixed emotions. Actually, Kathy asked Nellie why Linton had wanted to meet her at all in his state of ill temper. Nellie pointed out to her that young Linton's health had greatly deteriorated. Linton, overhearing the conversation, began to weep. It seemed from the way he talked that he was under the influence of some unseen presence. Actually, that's to say, Heathcliff's presence. Heathcliff's pressure on Linton. Kathy told him that she must now leave and that she must not conceal the fact that she had felt sadly disappointed to meet him on this particular occasion. Just then, Heathcliff was seen approaching. Linton clung to Kathy's arms and begged her not to leave him. Kathy, however, assured him that she would meet him again on the following Thursday, and she then left in Lily's company. Back at the Grange, Kathy felt a strange mixture of pity and regret. Uneasy doubt about Linton's actual circumstances, physical and social. So Kathy here has mixed emotions about meeting her cousin and senses that Heathcliff is the one pushing for them to meet. Readers, on their parts, who already know of Heathcliff's plan, realize that Kathy has a reason to be cautious. The last important point is Heathcliff's sinister influence upon his son Linton. This chapter actually is uneventful. Hardly anything happens here. Kathy and Linton meet once again, this time in the open air on the moors. The physical and mental state of Linton makes him even more pitiable to us than he has been before. It seems that some strange influence has been working upon his mind, as I have just said. We can, of course, guess that it must be Heathcliff tutoring him to act and talk in a particular way. The strain under which young Linton has been living at the Hyatt because of the sinister influence that his father, Heathcliff, has been exercising upon him is proving too much for this sickly young man to bear. Nellie has already given us a hint in the preceding chapter that Heathcliff had been treating his son Linton tyrannically and wickedly, that a father should treat a son in this manner makes Heathcliff even more detestable to us. And Linton is clearly dying, actually, while his father is still using him as means of revenge. And Lily's inability to reveal anything to Edgar foreshadows the forthcoming abduction. Now, the last chapter will be discussed here in this lecture is chapter 27, its summary and commentary. So, the main characters in chapter 27 are Edgar, Linton, Kathy, Harriton, Nellie, and Heathcliff. Setting places Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Time before 18. Okay. Actually, in the summary and commentary of chapter 27, we have three important points. The first point is about the next meeting between Linton and Kathy. So, on the following Thursday, Kathy and Nellie went again to meet young Linton at the same spot. On this occasion, Linton received them with greater animation, but it was not the animation resulting from high spirits or joy, but from fear. However, his mood was such that Kathy once again felt disappointed with him, and so she asked him why he had asked her to meet him again if the only result of their meetings was to be the feeling of distress on both sides. In reply, Linton trembled and looked at her, half supplicating and half ashamed. Kathy told him that her father was very ill, and that in normal circumstances she should not have left his bedside. Linton said that he was a worthless, cowardly wretch, and that he was too mean for her anger. He also said that she could hate his father, Heathcliff, but that she should not treat him, that is, Linton, with contempt. Kathy now lost her temper and called him a foolish, silly boy. She pointed out that his conduct was disgraceful and that he should not aggravate the situation by his abjectness. So during the week that follows, Edgar's health continues to deteriorate. So it is grudgingly that Kathy arrives to meet Linton. During the visit, Heathcliff arrives too and demands to know if Edgar is truly dying. Heathcliff is worried that Linton might die before Edgar does. Heathcliff asks Kathy to walk her cousin back to Wuthering Heights, although she meekly reminds Heathcliff that she is forbidden from visiting the farmhouse. Kathy disobeys her father's instructions. Linton's cries of anguish and Heathcliff's rage, which is directed toward Linton, however, convince both Kathy and Nellie to accompany them. After they are inside, Heathcliff imprisons Kathy and Nellie. He will not release her until after she and Linton are married. Overnight, Heathcliff locks, locks Kathy in a bedroom. In the morning, he frees Kathy from the room, but Nellie is held prisoner for 5 days, only seeing Harrington, who serves as her jailer. The second important point here is Linton's great fear of Heathcliff. Actually, Linton's reaction to Kathy's anger was one of extreme terror. He began to sob, saying that he dared not to tell her the real facts. He then said that his life was in her hands and that if she left him, he would die. At these words, Kathy was naturally moved and alarmed. Linton explained that his father had been bullying him and that he was terribly afraid of his father. Kathy said that she was not a coward and that no matter how afraid he was of Heathcliff, she was not in the least afraid of him. At her words, Linton began to weep wildly and to kiss her hands, and yet somehow he could not gather enough courage to speak out what was in his mind. So Linton is extremely pathetic and obviously terrified of Heathcliff. However, the manner in which he speaks to Cathy after she is lured to Wuthering Heights mitigates any sympathy readers may be feeling for him. After Cathy is locked inside, Linton reveals to her Heathcliff's plans, and he says of inescapable doom exists. This kidnapping, the first time Heathcliff does something entirely outside the limits of the law, is an act of desperation on his behalf. Linton needs to marry Cathy before Edgar's death, and Edgar needs to die before Linton does in order for Heathcliff to solidify his claim on Trashokrath Grange. Heathcliff's action clearly illustrates the philosophy that the ends justify the means. In doing so, readers tend to root for Cathy to be able to somehow thwart Heathcliff's growing power. Nellie does not witness the wedding, but Cathy and Linton do indeed get married. That was the end of our lecture today. For further reading, please refer to these references. Next lecture, I will continue with chapters 28 and 29 in Wuthering Heights. Thank you very much for your time and good luck.